Hi, everyone. This is Angel Borrelli. Welcome to Season 9, Episode 8 of the FIX. I have with me here today my favorite guest host, Larry Owens, who, yes, he has been missing from the last few podcasts, but there's been a reason. And Larry, I'm so happy to have you here to let everyone know what you're up to. So welcome to the show. But before I let you speak, I want to remind everyone of the background that Larry has. Correct me if I'm wrong, Larry. Professional lefty pitcher, professional pitching coach for a minor league team, D1 coach. Have I missed something?
No. I've coached in high school, junior college, Division II baseball, Division I baseball, independent league baseball, minor league baseball.
Yeah, so this is why you were highly sought after for the job you currently have. So now go ahead and spill the beans as to where you've been and who was lucky enough to land you.
Well, back in May, I knew I was going to resign at Bellarmine and pursue some other baseball opportunities. And then right before I was to begin that job, the high school that I attended in the town in which I live in Jeffersonville, Indiana, offered me their athletics director's job. So I'm the new athletics director at Jeffersonville High School, which is pretty cool because I get to, help the coaches and, help the kids and, use the experiences that I've had to try to improve things here. So it's been great. It's a few miles from my house and I'm loving it.
Well, I think it's fantastic that actually, in the other job you had was great. So the job offer you had was great. So this high school position is awesome. And I love that you're on this show because you didn't know I was going to do this part, but I have a lot of complaints about high school baseball right now and what I'm seeing, and I can't wait to hear you tell me if I'm dying to know what role athletic directors play in. See, we know that schools get money. I mean, you're D1, D2, D3 because of the number of students. We know students choose high schools because of sports. If you're a winning high school, you'll have the football players coming to you. So we know that there is some connection between the skill of the team, how well the teams do, and the school itself. And you have a whole department you have to keep running with tons of teams. So I'm curious because there's been so many crazy things that I see right now in baseball. And it's really part of the coaching that's going on. Some of the coaches, I think, not making great decisions. And for all you coaches out there, there's things involved in performance that are really not part of your lane. They really outside of your lane. And when I see a team doing some things that are crazy, I wonder, isn't there someone in the school? Schools are an educational thing. Aren't there people in the schools that they're of science, and if they see something going on, that there isn't some sort of coordination? So I am glad to have you here because I would love to know where there's a lacking in support for the coaches in the schools. And, I deal with so many high school pitchers, and high school baseball is the way that the guys get drafted or the way they get into great schools and then they get drafted or they get signed or they get scholarships. In other words, high school baseball is one of the most important in between cogs between when they're a youth pitcher and they're a college pitcher. So that you would think that just like if you want to go to MIT, you're going to take the best classes and have the best preparation for that in your high school. And I also assume that if you have like 15 guys that graduated and they got scholarships to MIT, that is really a good thing to be able to say with the engineering department. So I'm always curious when I see that the coaching staff or the way the team might be doing some things that could prevent success or diminish it. Is there any interaction or any support from the school? So, for example, are you understanding what I'm asking, Larry? And I want to
I
give you
believe
an
so.
example. Okay. So, for example, you and I had a random discussion the other day So let me preface this. So for everyone listening, coaches, pitchers, I want to express some of the things that I've seen in this last year. So, Larry, you may not know this, but so this year was a year where it looked like teams from all over, whether I was dealing with a college pitcher or high school, were making up for lost time from the previous 2 years where seasons were crazy. This is the first year, and I'm sure that this trend is not going to reverse itself. This is the first year, and I've been working with baseball pitchers since 1995, just strictly baseball pitchers. So I've been through that many seasons, and this is the first year. Well, travel ball was all year long. 4 days, 5 days off between high school and the beginning of summer ball, the summer season, 4 days off at Thanksgiving, and they just finished last weekend. And their first practices are starting in January. So baseball has changed. And I know this because pitchers can't, they'll call me to work with them and I'll say, well, when did you pitch last? Yesterday. Well, when do you pitch again? In 4 days. Well, how are you going to pitch with me? So what we have now is we have this all year long baseball. And with the fact that baseball pitching has always been a sport where there's a lot of injuries, you say to yourself, or I say to myself, when are these guys going to, one, rest their arm from pitching, not so they can sit on the couch, but so they can restore it in the gym? Because the gym is the most important place to develop a pitcher. And the reason why I've always been successful is because I started as a strength coach for pitchers. In 95, I'd already been a strength coach for athletes for many, many years. But the difference is focusing on pitching. So I know the better your body is, that's what you bring to the mound. And then you hone your skill on the mound. So this year, they're still trying to build the arms and they're still trying to take guys in the gym. But the way it's being done is so crazy that I think it's the area that I see one of the biggest flaws. So here we've got pitchers pitching all year. And if you're going to do that, you have to really carefully set up the planning for how you're going to do it. So, Larry, when you and I were talking, I asked you a question, and your answer was, I think the answer that I would get from any AD or any actual coach of a baseball team. Is there somebody on your staff that actually is a strength coach for baseball players? And you said, and I think I'm correct in this, that you have, don't really have a designated strength coach for that. Am I right?
Yeah, for that specific sport.
Yeah, and basically all high schools are like this, right?
I would say most, yes.
Yeah. So coaches, your job is baseball, and somehow, and I want to introduce this, in 95, I introduced strength training to pitchers. And was a graduate student, so I was volunteering time. And when I said, send me your team or send me your pitchers so I can strength train them, within a few weeks, they're saying, can you take the whole team? I was one of the first on the scene where I said, no, you have to lift weights if you're a pitcher. No, you have to be strong. No, you have to build size. And now that we don't even have to have that conversation. I'd like to introduce a concept into the world where coaches, you need to have somebody professional that's running the workout programs, because I don't think it's a coincidence. Every pitcher that comes to me from a high school, every college pitcher that comes to me, all the clients I have that are long distance that fly in, and all the clients I have that I've done long distance analysis with, where I have to ask questions, they're all saying the same thing. So there isn't one coach making an error, but they're all telling me the same thing. And the fact that there's no break right now means that you can't cycle the development of a baseball pitcher. So, one of the things that is the biggest mistake that I'm seeing is that this one's horrendous. Having the pitchers lift weights before practice.
Huh.
There's no way that, ask any golfer if he lifts weights before he golfs in a tournament. I'm talking about an hour before.
Right.
There's no, ask a football player if he's bench pressing before he's on the OL or DL on a football, in a football game. There's no way to develop that way. And yet, because of the crunch schedule and then some awareness that this stuff has to get done, high school coaches are sending their guys in to the gym before practice. Larry, just from your background, does that even make sense?
Not immediately before practice.
I'm talking about in the gym at 2:15 and on the field at 3:30.
That's no, never, ever, 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 ever.
Exactly. And then the other part is because of the lacking, I don't know if it's a disrespect. The gym is something I noticed this when I started in the gym. And then personal trainers became popular. Just because you knew how to work out, you could have a job. And so you would train people. And I had formal education to do what I did. And I see things in the gym to this day that I see people making money for teaching, or people like fathers trying to teach their kid. Strength training and working in the gym with cycles is very intricate. And it is so complicated. And when I got certified as a Olympic weightlifting coach, I respected it even more because the movements are so intricate in the way you use your body. So in addition to not understanding performance rules, like you never fatigue the body before you perform your skill always comes first. Practice, then training. In addition to the lacking of that, people are running the programs in the gym without the formal background of performance. And we know this because, and Larry, I would probably say that if you walked into a session where the baseball team was in the gym and you look at the chalkboard where the workouts are, I don't think you'd see a separate workout for pitchers.
Very likely.
I think you'd see the same workout. Coaches, the other players, they are not the same as the pitcher. The pitcher is a different animal and he has different stresses on his arm. I mean, catchers throw the ball back as many times as a pitcher pitches, but when you think of injuries on your team, how many times is a catcher injured? Not really that much. Am I right, Larry? Your brain thinks pitchers for injuries, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Pitchers mostly, yep.
Yes, because the movement and the motion, and because it's a precision skill. All the other skills, other than hitting, and a hitter's just stepping out. Hitter's skill is, obviously stepping out and rotating correctly to bring the bat to the ball. But his skill is with his eye and then his timing. A pitcher has to have tons of different skills. He's on one leg, then he goes to two legs, then he goes to one leg. He has an arm that has to stretch into huge ranges of motion. And then he has rotation that has to deliver the ball to a specific spot. And then he's got to do a very specific thing with his fingers and wrists. That's way different than any other athlete. So for them to train the same is absolutely insane. And then I hear programs where I say, show me what you're doing. And there's not even an order. In the gym, when you're training correctly, we train body parts and then we let that body part recover and then we hit it again a few days later. And so you have to have a systematic plan throughout the week. If you're training your legs every day and then specifically going onto the field, do you think that makes sense? Now, coaches, I love all of you because you have the passion and we have the dedication. I consider myself a coach. So I don't want you to hear this as you guys are messing up. I want you to hear this as kind of new information and a new way of thinking about something. Now, here's the real clincher for me with all this, Larry. This year, most high schools around here have invested in different forms of measuring velocity, vertical brake, horizontal brake. Many companies that are very famous have great ways of measuring things. And now we've got kids, they're 13, and they'll come and say, they'll send me a video and they've got all the readings on there. So everyone is being measured. And while location and getting outs is their job, velocity is always still on their mind. Well, if you lifted weights yesterday and you lifted weights the day before and the day before with no recognition of, oh, I've got to make a start or I'm in recovery or I'm being measured in 2 days for velocity, you're bringing an arm that's not really fresh. So, coaches, when you're looking at guys and you're getting readings that don't fit, ask them what they did the day before or the day of. And you may even know. So there's such this stress on velocity, but not the recognition of the other pieces of what it takes to actually have an arm be ready to compete. Larry, does all this make sense to you?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you think that the trends in baseball, because of measurements and the emphasis on data, that there's been a trend to almost be involved in one thing and overlook these other sort of things that to me are normal, but of course my orientation with my clients is completely different.
Right. Well, I think
Do you think it's a trend that started with all the measuring? What was your experience?
I don't know. I think people and parents in particular and coaches. I mean, they and the kids they want to do what's best for them, and in doing so, it seems like the emphasis has been, especially with pitchers, the emphasis has been on velocity, and that people have been chasing that for a while now. And then you get into they want opportunities after high school, so they think they have to play year round. And then so now you have young kids chasing velocity, playing year round, and no one around them who can, train them to do it. I question the safety of the whole thing anyway, but then you have inexperienced people training kids how to throw hard. And then by doing that, then you're leaving all the other stuff on the table. You're missing all the other things that are important and that go with it. And it's just, to me, it's a big mess.
Yes, you bring
No,
up a
no,
great.
I'm kind of that's kind of the thought. I mean, you have a bunch of people that want to do well by their kids, and they don't want to miss out on opportunities, and so they feel like they have to cram all of this stuff down the kid's throat. So, number one, well, you got to throw hard, you got to spin it, you got to spin it fast, you have to have all these attributes and all these measurable things, all of which have nothing to do with staying healthy. So, being aware of when you have to perform and what you're going to do to prepare to perform in regards to taking care of your body and preparing your body to do this. And it's just, it's gotten out of control. I thought it was out of control before. I think it's even getting worse.
Yes, and you said something really important about that all this is going on and there's like nobody to modulate it. There's no organization of it. And this is the problem when something new comes into a field. It's sort of like when few people were in the gym training for fitness and then all of a sudden everybody's in the gym and then certain places would come around and they set up private gyms where people were doing cleans and snatches. And that is, unless you're an Olympic weightlifting coach, having people do those, they took that and made it commercial. It seems like whenever the new thing is like, okay, you know what? Yes, pitchers, look at, they're getting big. We got to have everyone train. That's awesome. But when you integrate it, you have to have a respect. For example, when data started becoming popular, and we know that like from the Moneyball movie, teams went out and hired specific people to be their statisticians, to run the analysis, I mean, the bigger the team, of course, pros versus minor versus colleges with a budget versus high schools with a budget. They get the equipment. but they don't have the right people to interpret it, or they don't, or they do. But so there's a respect for statistics. So coaches will go, and this I know happens in the pros. Coaches will go to their guys and say, "Hey, what were the readings on that?" Okay, and again, even with the introduction of statistics, nobody's really looking, saying, "What does this number mean?" Sports scientists know if I measure something today, it has no shelf life. That kid could be doing something completely different tomorrow. And also numbers, they're supposed to tell you something to lead you somewhere. Hey, this is weird. We're getting this happening here, but we're not getting this happening here. Let me look at his body to see what he's doing that did or didn't produce those numbers. So there seems to be an introduction of new concepts without the formal understanding of how things relate to each other. And in the end, we have a human being with a body who is trying to perform well. And there are very distinct things that you have to do to perform well in the sports. And I'll tell you, football gets it right. And I've said this before, you don't see football players doing weird things. They do basic things that are important because they have collisions and they have to have certain energy, and their game is a battle. It's not, it's a battle for baseball too, but it doesn't look like the same type of battle. But baseball seems to be going in the wrong direction. It's like not teaching your kid how to drive, but you're getting him a better and a better car with a bigger engine. And he's continuing to get in accidents, but you're continuing to give him a car that's hard to control, that, when it goes around curves, it tails because it's got a light rear end or this or that. It's sort of like there's a lot of blind spots. And this year, I've always talked about some of these blind spots, but this year has been the worst. So the biggest issue that I think high school coaches need to start thinking about is really looking at when they're having their guys train, who's setting up the program, maybe bringing someone in. Maybe you hire an assistant coach or you have a volunteer coach who happens to be somebody who is a strength coach that you find out, and that you start to just say to them, "Hey, get it organized. I do this for all my pitchers. My pitchers have to do certain things at certain times." And I have high school pitchers who, when they were and most of my pitchers are pretty good, that when they went to the different schools to see which one they were going to select, and they were of course wanted by that school because of their reputation, where the parents actually said, "Hey, listen, so we have taken care of his arm. It's why he's not injured. He trains, he does this or that. How amenable are you to him performing, not doing anything the team doesn't do, but maybe having a slightly different organization to how he does things?" And they would say yes. And of course, they have lived by it. So there may be a time when the teams need to start being a little more organized because parents are becoming a little bit smarter about taking care of their kids. But I think the thing that the take home message from this discussion is, I don't want you to overlook the way you're setting things up to what you're getting in terms of performance. If you are making some of these mistakes, the good news is every one of your top performers is going to perform better. If you have people lifting weights every day and then they're going to practice, you're getting guys who have a fatigued nervous system. And when the fatigue in the nervous system exists, the reaction time is slower, the muscle contraction is slower. Plus, you can get a lot of aberrant types of weird injuries, especially hamstrings. And I think one thing I also want to say to coaches, this is just a side thought. I was out at a high school one day, and I saw a team coming in from the gym into the dugout. And I said, "What are you guys doing here? You're training." "Well, we got in trouble. One of the guys said something, smart mouthed it to the coach, and now we have to go out in the field and do this running intervals, which are designed for speed." But they had just trained legs. So they were using exercise as punishment, which I've been saying for 9 years, even more, as I've been a teaching podcast. Do not use exercise as punishment. And to have somebody after weights run for speed and also after legs, number one, you're training a slower fiber. So you're making those guys slower. Number two, the risk of injury. But see, here again, they had a baseball coach making that decision, and it is outside of his lane to understand those parameters. So, what I'm going to ask all of you high school coaches and all coaches to do is sit down with your strength coach if you have one. Let's say you're in college and ask them, can you deal with the pitchers differently? And can you help us know when the best time to train is? Can you help us get organized? In terms of what true performance is. If you don't have somebody, look for someone. There are tons of people around that are trying to get into the fitness world, whatever, and they're studying, they're doing things. And I can tell you that they will know more than you know. And that's the way it's supposed to be. You can't wear all hats. So, in with regard to that, Larry, the gimmicks and the exotic methods for improving velocity have increased even since you left baseball in June. Are you aware of that? I mean, it's out of hand, and it's in the same sort of department of what I'm talking about, which is wanting to measure performance but yet having pitchers do strange things on the field, not having anything in mind of what they're supposed to do, not knowing the right time and the right place for the gimmicks. And also, Larry, I've seen some drills that I'm an analytical kinesiologist. My job is to be able to analyze any movement. And I say, what is the person who designed this? What could he be thinking? And I'm always giving the benefit of the doubt to see if I can read inside someone's mind. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I haven't seen probably as much as you have lately, but some of it can be quite bizarre. That's for sure. What's your favorite?
I would say that the most ridiculous thing I've seen lately. Well, first of all, I'll go to the generic things that I think are really crazy, especially when they're used. But the most ridiculous small drill that I saw on three guys in 1 week, and each time I was seeing a different version of it, but each time one thing was the same, and that was a right-handed pitcher doing a drill where his right leg was in the max external stride position instead of his left leg, and the lefty had the opposite. There is no regard for the precision of pitching. Again, I'm going to go back to golf because golf is like as precise as pitching. It's similar to hitting, but hitting, the ball is coming from a different place. So that hitter he actually has variations in his movement. You're not going to see one swing be exactly the same because the pitch doesn't come in the same. Golf is what we call a closed skill, and pitching when no one's on base is a closed skill. That means the environment doesn't change. Nobody's saying to you, what you don't have to make an adjustment. You can take your time, of course, within the pitching clock, but you are in control of the situation. That's why it's not considered a closed skill if someone's on base because you've got a guy that you got to keep on base. So you're doing two things. That drills are designed and they don't honor the patterns. If you disrupt patterns of motion, you interrupt the precision skill development by introducing other things. It's ridiculous. Now, I know you're a lefty. Could you see yourself doing a drill where your stride had your left leg going out?
No, I've seen it. I don't think I've seen it in the context that it's used lately. I've seen it used for other things, and I still quite didn't really understand it. But no, it's quite bizarre. Yeah, I think of the thing that I immediately think of, and I recently saw it again, was I think it was either Smoltz. I know Leo Mazzoni when he was with the Braves. He had those guys, and a lot of guys in that era, even before then, threw a lot downhill. Well, I wouldn't say a lot. They threw often downhill. It was light work, but it was slightly downhill. To me, that's more skill work, doing something that's common to what you're going to be asked to do in a game, which is hit the glove throwing downhill. And to me, I would rather see drills or things orientated around, with that concept in mind, not not just arbitrarily. And I don't know if it's arbitrarily or if there's a reason, but I don't. Yeah, some of these things are quite crazy. I mean, I've seen where they stand on the rubber, on the pitching rubber, with their back to the home plate, and then they move their feet in such a way where you're kind of coming out of it and turning towards your glove side to throw the ball, moving down the hill backwards for a minute and then turning sideways to throw. It's kind of weird. There's just, I don't know if a lot of these folks are trying to think up things to seem smart or to seem groundbreaking, but there some things are some things were fine just the way they were. And I think that's partly why where we are, because the technology has come along and gotten better, and I think there's really good places for it. I'd like to see all this technology, and I'm sure they do, but I'd like to see it more geared towards, like, especially on the pro end, player acquisitions, as opposed to in the dugout while I'm pitching, you show me an iPad and tell me some weird number about my spin rate, or I got to do this more, or do this less, or to me, that's odd. I'd rather use those numbers and all these measurements that we gather for player acquisitions more so than, and then maybe measure. There's value. Measure where you are when you're going good, and then let's capture it. And then if you falter from that, then figure out why. Then it may help. It may tell us what you are. You're different. So why are you different? What's going on? And it may help you troubleshoot. So I think there's value in it there. And I think I'm hitting on what you're kind of talking about. It's just gone crazy.
Yes. There's a way to use everything, but in terms of drills, and this is the take-home message from this conversation, and then I want to talk to you about, I think, a great way to use data. In terms of drills, where you have something that the pitcher is doing, you have to think about why he's doing it, what is the purpose, and when to do it. So the first thing you have to ask when you're seeing a pitcher do a drill, let's say you hired somebody, they came in and used a certain program, and you've got something going on. You as a coach, I want you to look at it and go, is this disturbing a skill pattern that is part of what this pitcher has to do? So, for example, the wrong leg in front. I don't care if you think, oh, well, we're going to give it range and it's too close to what he does, but it's disturbing. And the truth is, the disturbance of it causes a strange throwing pattern. So, yes, somebody trying to be creative and not understanding the purpose of when you're doing a precision skill. This isn't a let's just, when someone's running and throwing, like I've seen pitchers never throw just from a stopped position 60 feet downhill before they pitch. They're still using the shuffle step, and they're, going downhill with the crow hop. Okay, that's all well and good, but you have to use it and come right back to what you really do before you are going to pitch. You can't leave the body in that mode, because then you're pitching and you're trying to make a shift. So you have to ask if the pattern is being disturbed. But before you ask yourself that, or even hear what I'm saying, I want you to shift your thinking back to something I've been saying. Pitching is a skillful, precision type movement. There are individual skills within the motion, and they all have to be executed so the body can get into position to throw the ball. And if you're not moving efficiently, somewhere in the motion, the brain shifts to keeping you on balance. For example, the stride when it's across the body. Yes, I know that, oh, wow, that ball might do something amazing across the plate. But if you're somebody involved in improving pitching, you've got to straighten that out, because his body he's pitching in a way where he's going to end up with elbow injuries or shoulder injuries. It's built on quicksand. When you have skills built on quicksand, all you get is a good season out of one pitcher, and the next thing he's injured. So when you are dedicated to pitching, and this is what I'm talking about for pitching coaches and instructors, try to teach efficiency of movement. So drills that interfere with precision confuse the pitcher's brain. So if the drill is interfering with a precision skill and a precision pattern, then it's not going to give you what you need. The other thing is, and this is something I've been saying, when you are doing exotic methods like using weighted balls, just because some pitcher in the major league likes to throw a heavy ball in his bullpen before he pitches and he throws gas, doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. So you have to understand science to know that if you are doing something that fatigues your arm when you're doing it because it's not the same weight implement or it's not the same distance, that whatever you do after that, not only are the little receptors in your body thrown off, but your muscles are fatigued in a way where it's a math problem. You're subtracting something from your performance. I don't care if you don't notice it. I don't care if you feel like, whoa, my light ball goes way faster right when I finish long toss at 260 feet, or right when I finish, 60 feet feels so fast once I've thrown that, or the 5 ounce ball or the ball feels so much better, lighter when I just finished throwing with an 11-ounce ball. That's only temporary. That's not changing the architecture inside of the muscle, which is what you need to address to be able to throw harder. That muscle has to contract at a different rate, has to be in the right position. So if you are, and coaches, please hear this, and pitchers, please experiment with this. Have your days. I don't use any of those things because I have to keep my arms, the guy's arms safe. Plus, I'm teaching the pitching motion. I'm not teaching these other things. The motion is specific, so I stick with that. But if you are going to do these things, you have to plan it into your cycle where you're not doing it the same day where you're expected to perform. And even if you say, well, it's just a bullpen, no, what you do in the bullpen is going to reflect in the next outing appearance that you have against hitters. You cannot do things that are not what you do and expect your arm not to be tired because, first of all, it's not really used to it. And second, it's not part of the skill. And 60 feet, 6 inches. And by the way, I love Leo Mazzoni. It's one of the first books I bought when I was in graduate school just to see what's a pitching coach saying. What he does and what he did is, he's very smart. There are a few pitching coaches. I read their books and I go, wow, they may not talk in the same language, but they kind of knew what was up. And the deal is throwing downhill is what a pitcher does. My guys come off of surgery and flat ground throwing programs. They're never truly flat. I have the catcher up and I want them to work downhill at different distances, of course, when we're building back the arm because the stride's a different length and it's a downhill trajectory. So just having a slight hill and then throwing when someone's up, it's like playing catch downhill, which is way more it's a different type of intervention than just flat. And then the arm is getting sort of conditioned to both issues at the same time. So whenever you're dealing with the skill, it has to be close to what you're actually doing. So guys and coaches, please, this is again, when do they train? When do they go out? If you want them out at 260 feet, when do they do that? When are they going to recover from that? When are they going to throw their bullpen? And then when are they going to actually pitch in a game? Now, the thing is, you're all involved with this data stuff. So hearing what I'm saying and think about the day, let's say you have a day where you're going, okay, we're going to measure offensive skills on this day and defensive skills on this day. think about what that pitcher is going to be doing when you're actually going to put him up against the gun and evaluate him from that. If he is fatigued or you see him out and he's throwing, you know, X number of feet, or he's using weighted balls and doing exercises to warm up with weighted balls, you're warming up something different. There's different muscles involved. Or if the ball's bigger, there's a different wrist and forearm grip. I see guys doing that reverse throwing over the shoulder. It's insane to do that before you pitch. You're doing strange things with a muscle that already gets wear and tear. I see things that are fatiguing the pitcher's arm in terms of the system they use when they get to the field. A pitcher who's performing should be warming up the exact way that his body is used with the right size implement before he pitches and not do anything exotic. And if you are going to be hell bent on measuring and collecting data, will you just know the data is not pure. And for all you fathers out there you've come home and gone, my kid, he looks like he's not improving with this or that. Well, what did he do at that showcase before they measured him? What did he do the day before? Did he even warm up right? And all of these things have an effect. So if you're going to use data, in science, we use data completely differently than when random people say, oh, let me get out my gun and let me measure my son's velocity, and then you take that number as if it's absolute. Data always has really cool things you can use it for, and it's never black and white. It's a moment in time. So at least be aware that if you're not getting numbers you want and you're making some of the mistakes that I'm saying are so common that I see, know that those numbers, don't treat those numbers as if they're absolute. Please know that they're not, especially if you're not doing everything right. Now, in terms of what you were talking about, Larry, with using data, you're absolutely right that, telling a pitcher and showing him something when he comes off the mound is ridiculous. And or looking at the number like, oh boy, this is really bad. The way that I use any type of data, which may be for me, what I'm doing is I might do comparisons where, let's say, and I always tell my pitchers, if you're in a bullpen, if you're monitoring somebody's velocity in a bullpen, all you're getting is what that velocity is in that bullpen. You're not getting what his velocity is because the chemistry of pitching doesn't occur in a bullpen. But let's say he's doing a bullpen and you're working on something. So you take the velocity, you write it down. You say, okay, so your arm is late. And so let's work on that. And then you create a drill, and then you take a velocity, and now you're comparing, and then you're seeing what made it go up, what made it go down, and you're using that as just another tool to help you know what's happening. And you also, when you're doing that, have to be able to say, well, we're 2 hours into the session, or this was at 1 hour. You have to take those things in. You using numbers qualitatively is critical, where you know they're not absolute. An 88-mile-an-hour pitch in one setting doesn't say anything other than he just threw 88 miles an hour in this moment. And so there are ways to use that, but because there's such a reliance on it for information that you show coaches or that you share with someone when you're looking to get signed or, a scholarship or whatever, you have to know that if you're going to do that, make sure the setting is pure and make sure that there's nothing else that has been involved that could affect that data. So you have to almost have embrace the whole concept of everything I'm saying, which is every little thing a pitcher does, what he does when he gets to the field, how he warms up his body, how he warms up his arm, and how true he stays and he helps his body perform. What I see is things being done that work against the pitcher. It's not just off the mound, but actually on the field because the pressure on them for performance is so great. I never have I have fathers call me when they have kids that are 13 and 14 and say, he's doing well, but we want to make sure he's doing it right because he's really good and we don't want him to be injured. This is the newest trend that I've seen with the younger pitchers. The fathers are scared, but I still to this day have never had an older pitcher come to me and say, hey, I want to make sure I'm doing things right. They call me and say, can you help me throw harder? So it's sort of a twisted kind of scenario. Does that make sense, Larry?
Yes, unfortunately, yes. that I say that because that just kills me. I mean, I think you're speaking for a lot of kids and a lot of parents and coaches. They don't. The focus isn't on how can I become a better pitcher. It's I want to throw harder.
Right.
That's what it always goes back to. It seems like lately, or for a while at least, and we're still knee deep in it, I suppose.
Exactly. So rather than for anybody listening to this, I'm not trying to my business isn't about saying, oh, no, you don't want to throw harder. You want to throw efficiently. You want to do this or that. Because velocity is a product of moving efficiently, which is what, I'm a pitching motion coach. That is my job. I don't follow gimmicks. So pitching motion happens a certain way. It's in literature. I'm a sports scientist. I follow the literature. And guess what? It doesn't change. The body doesn't change. That's why I love being an analytical kinesiologist. One day we say, oh, the knee does this when you're walking. And guess what? 500 years later, the knee does this when you're walking. It doesn't change. So the way the ball is supposed to be delivered so that you have max revolutions in the shoulder joint, there's a certain angle that we know if you're within these limits, that joint's going to go crazy. Oh, well, if you're throwing a different way, or you're twisting your body or your sidearm or whatever, oh, well, those rules don't apply. Your arm's not in the place to experience that. So I'm not saying don't want to throw harder. I'm saying if you are going to be someone who deals with any component of performance, which would be coaches, you want your pitchers to perform well. You want it pitchers, you want the data, which now, before it used to be your ERA. It used to be, you got a W or you got an L, and now it's my horizontal break, my vertical break. Those numbers look funny. My spin rate. If you are you live in this world, and it is the world that we're in. But let's all get on the same page. If you're going to put a pitcher up to measurements, let's make sure. Like when parents hire me, and I have great pitchers, they say, we want you to lay everything out, especially when it's an off season or maybe it's preseason. Lay everything out. How do we do it? There's a precise day that they train their back. There's a precise day when they do chest and shoulders. There's a precise day when they throw. They're in the gym. All my guys train because I'm an aggressive strength coach. They all train. They all throw pens. They all have flat ground days. They all and we establish these rules based on who they are, their role. Like, I ask every pitcher, do you like to play catch the day before you pitch? Absolutely. Most of them say. Do you like to play catch the day after? Most of them say no. Some say yes. Actually, it loosens me up. Okay, well, we're going to do that, but then the next day will be off. We take every pitcher, what he does, we pull out the things. Like the first thing I ask my pitchers when they want to throw harder is what their habits are. And mostly I'm removing some things and they experiment and they go, wow, I didn't realize how tired my arm was when I did this. I go, well, if you love doing it, let's put it in the right place. So coaches and pitchers, I'm not saying don't want these things. I'm saying no, that everything works as a system. Your body has to be recovered. You have to know when to do what. You can't do fatiguing things and then take your pitching motion and expose it to fatigue. This is why we say, and it's why, like the ASMI says this, all the surgeons say this, the number one reason for injury is pitching with a fatigued arm. That doesn't just mean telling your coach you're done and like after 4 innings because your arm's tired. It means, is your arm tired because you trained biceps the day before? Is your arm tired because you trained, you threw weighted balls before you got on the mound because you thought it was going to help you throw harder? Is it tired because you went out 200 feet and the trajectory is up and over and then down? A completely different kind of warm up. You have to put all the pieces together. And because now there are so many pieces, the respect for knowing you have to be in the gym, the respect knowing you got to train certain parts to stay uninjured, knowing you have to throw bullpens, knowing you have to throw flat ground, knowing you're going to be up against data and guns and people that are giving you numbers that can say, oh, you're good or oh, you're bad. There's so much going on. Somewhere, someone has to introduce the concept, which is the take home message from today, that if you want to unlock your potential, you have to put all the pieces together. And I can tell you it works because it's the way I've been running my business for since 1995. Organization, making sure everything's done at the right time, and everything's personal to the pitcher's body, evaluating your own body for its weaknesses, evaluating your pitching for its strengths, its weaknesses, knowing that the way you get better is to take something that's weak and make it stronger. Don't make what's stronger stronger, make what's weak stronger. And then you improve your body as a whole. If you have an error in your programming, whether it's when you go to the gym or whether it's that you don't recover from pitching, I had a father tell me his 13-year-old son threw in one game on a day, threw in another game an hour later, and pitched the next day as well.
Eh,
That's, I know, and he's 13, but his stature was solid. And and it took everything for him to pull out of his kid, because kids say, my arm's fine. And then it turned out it wasn't fine.
yeah.
So I know it's insane. So coaches, stick with whatever. If you're saying, I don't care, we're training before practice, we're doing this, then just know that you can't at the same time be upset with a pitcher who, he gets in and he's throwing BP and he can't throw a decent ball. Or let's say he gets injured again. You can't just put that off. I'm hoping that you can't unhear what I'm saying. Unlocking the potential of every athlete you work with means putting all the ends together and having some consciousness. And that's probably the biggest take home message. Have consciousness about all these parts that are now part of your sport, and know that you can't just throw them together. A good chef doesn't just pull every ingredient and throw everything into a pot and expect it to taste good. He may have a lot of things in there, but there's a reason and they're carefully pulled together. And that's the same thing when you're designing, I design quote unquote menus for my pitchers. So they know everything they're supposed to do and on what day. And guess what? Then their body is always on their side. And then they can be out there trying to improve and also trying to meet some of the requirements that are on them so that they can, do better in the future. So these are the things that I've seen this year that have been on my mind, and watching it is the hardest part of my job, or hearing about it when they call me. And of course, when you have injuries, it's a different thing. And that's the very hungry pitcher that wants to know, what did I do wrong? But the pitchers that I get, tons of pitchers that are not injured, they just want to perform better. And when I hear and see what they've been doing, I realize they don't even know how well they could perform. And until we clean that up, I don't care how good you are with the pitching motion, you're just not going to be 100% available for that skill. So I'm hoping that, and I know everyone listening has had the same kind of baseball season. You've all had the intervention with gimmicks, the data, I know that there isn't anyone out there saying, geez, I don't, we don't have that, or I don't know that. And I know there's coaches out there that know what I'm talking about and that have it. They have people that can help them keep everything in order. This is just an opening thought to put some ideas in your head about a better way. And especially now, there's only a few weeks before the season starts. It's not too late to take a look at what your guys are doing and try to reorder it. And when you reorder it and you look at it standing in the dugout and you see that somebody is or isn't doing something, but they are doing this, you'll understand that there's some order to what I'm suggesting. And that's what I'm hoping all of you leave this podcast with, the idea of how can I become better organized. I'm not saying you have to not do this or not do that. I'm just saying look at the big picture and get it organized, because it's only going to get more confusing from here, because baseball hasn't stopped with the kinds of crazy things that are happening. And Larry, how much does an AD ever have? Do you guys have meetings with coaches? I mean, ADs don't have responsibility with any of this. Is this correct? In other words, a school can do something kind of crazy, and is every sport independent from you?
Well, I mean, they all fall under me, and I certainly have meetings with everybody in regards to what they specifically do from a strength and conditioning point. From that standpoint with their team, that's they're going to have a lot of say so in that. And we have a strength coach here, and we offer a strength class during the day, but we don't have a strength coach for every team here. But a lot of that's on it's all on the coaches. I mean, I can't imagine too many high schools in the country that have more than one strength conditioning coach, and that it's specifically geared towards each sport. I would say a lot of coaches, and the coaches that either have that background. I mean, it's very likely that some coaches have a strength conditioning background and can handle it, and then there's some that don't have that background but seek information from people like you and others, and then there's some that I'm sure just wing it and or don't do much in the way of strength conditioning, especially as it pertains to pitchers. I'd say we're kind of in that boat. I don't know. We don't have anyone on staff that has the background, the strength conditioning background for baseball players, in particular pitchers only. So that's the way it is.
So So to all the coaches out there, do some research when you're interviewing for assistant coaches, especially the volunteer ones. Find out if they have any background, and if you've got somebody that does a strength and conditioning, say to them. I mean, I'm always, pitching is specific. Say to that coach that's training your team, hey, you know what? I want to know that the pitchers are doing something specific. So why don't you do a little research on some exercises, what to do, what they shouldn't do, and inspire them to become more. People involved in exercise, strength, and conditioning, they want to improve, and that's the way you do it. You do research, and then you design a program that fits. It's called specificity. So don't be afraid to ask for that, but consider it. And if the situation is where you're doing it, consider recovery. Consider when you're doing it. Feel free to email me with questions. There's nothing more that I love than educating a coach, especially if he's wanting to move in the direction of clarity. But just think about the pitcher as a whole being, and that every single thing he's doing involves and has an effect on what he does on the mound. And it's like tying one arm behind his back if all these other ducks are not in a row. So, and it's never too late to make some adjustments or some changes. And I'm hoping that I have inspired you to maybe look at things a little bit differently and to see where you might be able to make one improvement. And that is my final message to all of my listeners. And I want to thank you for a solid 9 seasons. I'll be returning probably in February, somewhere around the middle when the pitchers report, with the first episode of season 10. throughout this season. Take care of yourselves. And if you have any questions about anything I've talked about today, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to have a discussion with you. So, Larry, thank you so much for coming on. It was so appropriate to have you come on for the last show of the season.
Well, thanks for having me. As always, anytime you need me, I'm here.
Okay, awesome. So goodbye for now. Have a wonderful holiday season. I'll see you next year. Bye-bye.